Hi, my name is TJ Burdick, and welcome to Signum Dei. Dear Lord, you are the beginning of wisdom and the primal source of our being. May your Holy Spirit be with us as we pursue the perfection of your presence. And may our faith meet your grace in a collision of intellectual surprise, and as a result, the joyful acts of love that are the fruits of knowing you.
When the woman came to Jesus with an alabaster jar, she intended to bathe his feet in the perfume that it contained. Jesus' disciples took a logical stance against her and claimed that she should have sold the perfume and given the money to the poor. From a utility standpoint, perhaps they were right. But Jesus, who saw beyond the economic motives and the logical utility, said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She's done a beautiful thing for me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me." Some things never change, do they? Today the poor are still among us. The financial poor are widespread in third world countries, and sadly, even in the developed world where resources abound. What's more, the spiritually poor are present in every corner of the world, and I'd be willing to bet that their total far outweighs those who are economically below the poverty line. This generation has been hemorrhaged from the truth due to an onslaught of relativism, consumerism, and the culture of death in which we all find ourselves. While the financially poor can and should be provided for through our corporal works of mercy, the spiritually poor must also be given their fair share through the spiritual works of mercy. Our first order of business, then, is to introduce them to God, the one being who can provide for every one of their life needs. As I just mentioned, the relativism, consumerism, and all the other isms darken the landscape of truth in this world. They put blinders on us, God's most perfect creations, and cause us to become more ignorant in our ability to reason, and thus less motivated to pursue virtue. For many people, God simply cannot and does not exist. For others, he may exist, but his place in the totem poles of their priorities is significantly lower than other aspects of their lives. It's time to put him back on the top of that totem pole. It's time to prove to the world that God does indeed exist, and if they want to become fully alive, they need to believe. This is a difficult task in today's world. Not only are we fighting against the isms of modernity, but we're also battling one particular misnomer that has plagued the advancements of God's kingdom on earth for several decades now. I'm talking specifically about the great faith versus science debate that pigeonholes Catholicism into something it most certainly is not, a religion that negates science and reason. We are, in truth, the religion that practices science and reason to the highest degree, but it only takes a few minutes of reading Aquinas to understand that. Sadly, however, the world thinks otherwise, so it is our job to prove it. Aquinas provides us with a rational roadmap to understanding God's existence in his famed 5 ways for the existence of God. These ways are the bridge that join faith and reason. They allow the rational human mind to travel upon the insight of divine revelation so as to arrive at the non-negotiable truth that God does indeed exist. It is only when we're capable of arriving at the conclusive evidence of God's existence that we're capable of advancing in a knowledge about him and his church. That's why understanding these 5 arguments is paramount for the beginning Thomist, for it is understanding who God is that all of Aquinas' works have their unity. As a precursor, you should know that these ways are not proofs of God's existence. As you recall, the Summa is written to teach the basics to people who already believed in the Catholic faith. These ways, then, are a means through which the faithful can rationally accept God's existence so as to explain the reasons for their faith to others. That means that using these arguments as proofs will only work if the person you are teaching already has the light of faith within them. Now, that's not to say that an atheist or an agnostic doesn't have the light of faith. It simply means that it is more likely that you'll have success in explaining who God is using these ways if the person you are speaking with is seeking truth to the greatest extent that they're capable. Each individual soul has been given the gift of reason and can use it to discover the truth about God. Not everyone, however, pursues such truth willingly. It'd be wise to remember that if you ever plan on using these 5 ways in a religious discussion or debate. For now, let's focus on how we can use the 5 ways to enliven our own faith. The first way is the argument from motion. Through our senses, we can see things in movement. We can also see the things that cause these things to move. For example, a bowling pin is knocked down by a bowling ball that travels down the lane insofar as a person or a thing is able to roll it toward the pins. The first of Thomis's ways hinges upon the fact that anything in movement must have been actualized by an outside force, because nothing can move itself. The chain of outside forces that lead to the movement of the thing can be retraced to a single unmoved mover, which we call God. So, the pins are knocked down by the ball, which was thrown by the hand, which was inclined by the shoulder of the man, who created inertia through his steps, etc., 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 until we retrace every movement to the first movements of creation, where God, the first unmovable mover, set the world into movement. The next argument is the argument from efficient causality. In the natural world, a thing cannot exist prior to itself. Everything generates from another thing. As it follows, the thing can only procreate its own species, creating a chain that requires its existence. If that thing didn't exist, the rest of its lineage could not exist either. This is simple biology in that a creature must come from a similar creature with its species. Hence, a human has parents who also has parents who also has parents. And this lineage of life can be traced logically to the first parents and they to an uncreated creator who we call God. The third argument is the argument from contingency of being. This argument states that since it is possible for things to not exist, then there must be a thing always existing to maintain the existence of all things. Animals are said to exist when they are conceived, but they cease to exist when they die. Given that time is infinite, then it would follow that nothing should exist at all because it will all eventually perish. So there must be a forever existing thing that keeps existence existing. This always existing controller of existence we call God. The next is the argument from degrees of perfection. This is probably my favorite argument because it provides every human intellect with the greatest challenge it could possibly accept. It states that everything has a certain potential to achieve perfection. All things vary on their point of this perfection spectrum. On a purely physical level, take for example two dogs. One is sick and the other is healthy. The healthy dog is the more perfect because the very fact that there is a comparison between the two implies that there is a degree by which they are judged to be perfect. Now, compare the healthy dog with a bigger, kinder, stronger, and cuter dog, and you'll see my point. Through the comparison of like things and their attributes, we create a metric by which we see a fulfilled potential or actualized best version of a thing. Now, since all things are constantly working to achieve a better version of itself by constantly actualizing itself to a higher degree, there must be a final, perfect being that satisfies this degree to total perfection. This being we call God, and his challenge to us is to imitate his Son, through whom we have the opportunity to achieve our full potential and actualize perfection when we see him face to face in the beatific vision. The next argument is the argument from final causality. This final argument states that since non-intelligent things act in regular ways with predictable results, then there must be a being that enables them to follow their natural patterns of growth, movement, and etc. While some might call this cause Mother Nature, the Christian would call this being God, who maintains the order of creation. From the water cycle, the reproduction of flowers by way of pollen-transporting bees, the number of grapes that form on a vine, the formation of mountain ranges by plate tectonics, and everything in between, the fact that all things act and adapt so as to flourish in their given environments leads us to believe that there must be some intelligent force that orders it all. Aquinas held that we are unable to apprehend the divine substance by knowing what it is, yet we are able to have some knowledge of it by knowing what it is not. You'll notice that each of the 5 ways are derived from negative exclusions. By that I mean that they don't properly define who God is, but they use the strategy of via negativa, or the negative route, by ruling out what God is not, so as to arrive at a generalization of who he is. It would go beyond our limits of human reason to fully comprehend who God is, because if we could do that, then we would be God. So there you have them, the 5 proofs for the existence of God as shared to us by St. Thomas Aquinas. Like I mentioned earlier, these ways are not necessarily proofs in the common sense of the word. They do indeed provide a foundation for an even deeper philosophical discussion, but they aren't the end-all, be-all, definitive exclamation point that many think them to be. Only people who have accepted the Catholic faith can be convinced of them completely. But even then, there are some holes that need some filling before we can use them as tools for evangelization and not merely for our personal spiritual growth. In our next video, I'll be speaking with Dr. Kevin Vost, who will supply us with the material to cover those holes. We'll be talking about Aquinas' 5 ways, especially how modern philosophers have attempted to debunk them, and how we can respond. We'll also go into the various strategies on how to teach anyone from atheists to faithful believers using Aquinas' logical methods of explaining the faith. Until then, be a sign of God today and every day. The world needs you.